Welcome everyone back to weekly weather updates, and in today's video we're going to have a look at the latest from the live radar, run through the UKV, have a look at the precipitation and the temperature over the course of the next 5 days. It is remaining fairly dry, especially in the south, cloudy though, with increased precipitation pushing in further northwards as we start to see a westerly flow take over the next few days. High pressure will try and hang on in the south, but it does look likely that low pressure will dominate for many parts, especially in Scotland, where we will start to see more precipitation. Some of it could fall as wintry precipitation, though, with some cooler air masses pushing in at times. As we look in the longer range, look at the GFS, GEM, ECMWF, and the ensembles, there is huge uncertainty as we do head into February, as it's all got to do with higher pressure. It does look likely that high pressure is going to drift further southwards over the coming days, with low pressure dominating, as I said, further northwards. But in around a week's time, 5 to 7 days' time, it's looking likely high pressure tries to push back in. Now that is where most models do get to, high pressure pushing back in and sitting pretty much over the top of us. But it's then what happens to that higher pressure? As we have been alluding to over the last few days, some of the runs have been pushing that high pressure further northwards, up towards Svalbard and towards Scandinavia, and pulling in pretty cold easterly winds. Now that is one scenario. Others show the high pressure sat over the top of us, generally mild upper air temperatures, but most likely still being in the depths of winter, we'd see an inversion, cold, frosty, foggy conditions. The final outcome would be just that high pressure getting shoved southwards again and a flat westerly coming in, as we do have a pretty strong stratospheric polar vortex sat towards Greenland over the course of the next couple of weeks. So it would take a big Scandinavian high to halt that, but it's not out of the question any of these scenarios. So I have seen some rumblings that it's just going to be mild, wet and windy through the first half of February. Now that could happen, but looking at the latest models, it's not that clear cut and it's not definitive at this stage. There still is a lot of uncertainty within these outcomes, and we could see something in the middle, we could see something quite snowy, could be seeing something quite cold, or we could be seeing that very mild, wet and stormy sort of pattern. So we'll run through the models and again see where that high pressure does head in around a week's time. So do remember, if you enjoy my videos, make sure you like and subscribe, and remember to follow me on Twitter as well, the link's in the description. So if we do start on the live radar, you can see it is generally quite dry for many, but it is a pretty cloudy outlook at the moment, with patches of drizzle popping up here or there, again a few areas through Scotland, and over the course of this afternoon, this evening, maybe some across England and Wales as well, but it is generally dry outlook and temperatures around average for the time of year. More precipitation will be heading into the north over the coming days, so we are expecting some lighter weather fronts initially, for eventually perhaps some heavier rain maybe towards the middle of next week. Now, if you keep on the temperatures around 1 p.m. this afternoon, you can see generally around average for the time of year, some blues and yellows, so some areas slightly below, other areas slightly above, and again favoured more further westwards, where we have more of a westerly influence. Areas that have more lighter winds, not seeing as much mixing of air, for example in the south, keeping those cooler conditions, but nothing particularly cold at all. As I said, average for the time of year. If you go to the UKV now and have a look at the precipitation and the temperature over the next 5 days, if you run to around 3 p.m. this afternoon, you can see it is generally a cloudy outlook with a few patches of drizzle in places. Over the course of this evening, that cloud just maintains its strength, and again some more patches of lighter rain and drizzle through southwest England and parts of Wales, and eventually into tomorrow, perhaps a weather front approaching from the north and the west through Sunday afternoon, so some more moderate rain through Northern Ireland and Scotland. Behind that, cooler air mass pushes in, and could be some wintry showers and generally some clearer skies there, but of course a bit more instability, so yeah, more showers around and cooler conditions. Further southwards, more of a gloomy, cloudy outlook. As for every Sunday evening, that weather front eventually spreads through, but again doesn't produce a lot of precipitation along it, maybe some light rain, some maybe drizzle as well. Beyond that, showers into Scotland, quite heavy, perhaps wintry showers. Could even see a snow warning issued for that, or even ice warning, as it does look like some quite bulky wintry showers over the higher ground. As we head through Monday, though, again, clearer skies further eastwards, but you can see a bit of a weather front approaching from the west, and this is where we could start to see some heavier precipitation pushing in for Northern Ireland, Republic of Ireland, and Scotland. But whenever it moves southwards and eastwards, it does lose its intensity. So yes, through early hours of Tuesday, could be a band of precipitation through central southern England, but it's looking likely to be quite light and breaking apart as it moves in, and we can see more wintry showers pushing into Scotland. Through Tuesday afternoon, again, quite an unsettled outlook in the north. Big, heavy, wintry showers pushing in over higher ground and inland, rain for low-lying areas and further towards the coast. But look at the south, it's pretty dry and pretty sunny as well. Again, just showing you the contrast between the north and the south over the next few days. Beyond that, eventually some more heavier rain pushes in from the west, a bigger weather front, and again, we do see the impacts of the weather front in the south, but to nowhere near the same extent as further northwards, with just generally cloudy outlook with that heavier rain and perhaps some hill snow further northwards. Now, if you look at the max temperatures, you'll be able to see that today temperatures are around average for the time of year, around 5 to 8 degrees. Again, nothing too extreme, so nothing really out of the ordinary, but feeling pretty chilly out there in places we've got a bit of trapped cloud. It doesn't feel all too great. Through this evening, there could be a frost in places where we see clear skies, but a lot of areas have trapped cloud, so it will hold those temperatures up. Through tomorrow, temperatures maybe slightly higher than today, around average to maybe slightly above average, maybe 7 to 10 degrees. And then into Sunday evening, into Monday, cold in the north, but further southwards, actually well above average, 7 or 8 degrees for the overnight low. And then into Monday afternoon, you can see again more towards average for the time of year, 6 to 8 degrees. And then finally, into Tuesday for the final day of January. 8 degrees, 8 to 10 degrees in the south and the east, much colder further northwards, so a much bigger temperature contrast there. Cold in Scotland, mild in the south. But again, that colder air in Scotland is accompanied by a lot more instability, so a lot more showers, where the milder air in the south is accompanied by drier weather. And then into Wednesday, overnight temperatures well down towards the low single digits, frost in Scotland, and for the first day of February, it's average really, around 5 to 8 degrees for the highs through many areas, much colder over the higher ground, especially in Scotland. So cold-ish start for the start to February, but nothing spectacular at this stage. A big split between the north and the south. That's something that's going to be really apparent over the course of the next week to 10 days before that high pressure does build in, and then we'll see where that goes. So if we do now have a look at the GFS and see what happens to that high pressure in the longer range from the 6 o'clock run this morning, you can see high pressure over top of us at the moment, but you see that north to south split. Low pressure, cold northwesterly winds in Scotland, further southwards, more of a flat westerly, originating from the mid-Atlantic more, around that higher pressure, and dry conditions as seen under higher pressure there. It could be a slight little northerly there through Wednesday, spreading colder air for all in, and that could produce some more precipitation in the south with a brief lowering in the pressure, but the high pressure builds back in, and as said, in around a week's time, towards next weekend, you see the pressure build. High pressure builds over all of us, and it builds with quite a warm air mass. But it's where that high pressure goes. At its stage, you've got very strong tropospheric polar vortex out towards Greenland and northeast Canada, trying to push a westerly wind in, with these big low pressure systems gathering in the North Atlantic, getting fueled by very cold air spilling out of northeast Canada and mid-Atlantic mild air from the Azores. But equally, we've got high pressure over top of us and cold air rushing to Eastern Europe. Now, let's see what happens from this latest GFS. Other runs recently have pushed it northwards and produced cold easterly winds, and this looks likely to do that before eventually the westerly winds do win out, but another high pressure system builds in and actually keeps us under higher pressure, with that high pressure over the top of us. But if we look at the upper air temperatures, it does temporarily pull in some colder air for a time there. So it would actually be quite cold, but relatively dry there as well. So the GFS here does produce some colder weather, but very much is on more of the dry, cool, frosty sort of pattern, with high pressure dominating our weather. We will have to see, though, where that high pressure goes, because some runs have it just sitting well to our south, others have it pushing much further northwards, pulling in bitterly cold air, and some even showing sort of a beast from the east sort of pattern, which I would say is highly unlikely, but we have seen some of those runs in the last couple of days. But again, I must reiterate, anyone saying it's a done deal in terms of flat, westerly, mild conditions is definitely not been looking at the models in the last day or two. Yes, the long range outlook and generally from the models, it is looking like a westerly sort of pattern. The NAO and the AO are both positive, but looking at the individual runs and the ensemble runs, higher pressure is definitely going to be taking more of an influence than we initially thought, even a few days ago. And again, it could push northwards and produce cooler weather. We'll just have to keep an eye on it. If we do compare it to the GM, see how what does that show at day 10. Again, high pressure building in over the course of next weekend after pretty much a flat westerly week, colder in the north, milder in the south, drier in the south, and wetter in the north. You can see towards next weekend that high pressure extends northwards, coming up against a very strong tropospheric polar vortex out towards southern Greenland. But that high pressure almost wins out, and you can see it does try to build northwards. If you look at the upper air temperatures, you can actually see reasonably cool air is over the top of us under that high pressure. So again, this is similar to the GFS in terms of outcome at the surface, but quite a bit different in terms of the actual pressure patterns. The high pressure is not as much dominating here. It's having a go at dominating, but it's not quite dominating. But towards the surface, we'd still see pretty cold, frosty, cool conditions. So yeah, both runs are showing that high pressure sort of in the middle, not staying well to our south to allow that westerly flow to dominate, but not pushing northwards enough to produce sustained cold weather. GFS does have a go and does get it in for a couple of days, but nothing substantial. If we do compare it to the ECMWF at over the course of the next 10 days. Again, westerly wind this week, low pressure in the north, high pressure in the south. Eventually that high pressure ridges northwards towards day 10, and the ECMWF has the high pressure losing out completely. This is a situation where we see a flat westerly, cold polar maritime air pushing in. It's actually pretty cold, but again, it would only produce any winteriness over higher ground here. But again, this complete contrast to the GFS and the GM in terms of outcome. Towards the surface would be very unsettled, cool, windy as well, whereas the other two runs would be much drier, probably cool as well, and very low winds as with that, with a lot of frost as well. So very subtle differences in that strength of the high pressure coming up against the westerly flow, the strong jet stream, whether the high pressure can divert it further northwards. We'll have to see. But that will decide whether we go cold, frosty, and potentially even snowy if we did get that easterly wind in, or whether we just go mild or sort of flip-flop between mild and cold with a westerly stormy sort of flow. Now if you finally compare it to the GFS ensembles, you can see there is quite a lot of uncertainty in the longer range. The next 5 days, maybe 5 to 7 days really, generally around average, maybe actually slightly below average, and a little bit of a cooler spell there towards the middle of the week as we see a bit of a northerly wind push in. Again, not thinking anything substantial with that. Wintry showers in the north and maybe a widespread frost for a night or two. Beyond that, as we head towards the middle of February, the next 10 days beyond that, we're generally average, maybe trending slightly above average, but there are quite a few runs well above average and well below as well, maybe 5 to even 10, getting below that -5 point to maybe -10 in places. So again, there are some colder outlooks there, and precipitation isn't particularly high. If that westerly, mild, stormy sort of pattern was coming off, you would expect the precipitation signal here to be a lot higher, but it is trending lower and pushing back in date as well. So definitely higher pressure is trending more than lower pressure at this stage, especially in the south. And of course, some of these runs, even with upper air temperatures around freezing, if we did see high pressure sat over the top of us, it would be pretty cold, and some of these runs could be precursors to colder easterlies as well. That is something as we have to look at as well. We saw a GFS run, I think yesterday or the day before, well, on the ensemble chart, it was pretty mild. It was one of the mildest runs, but when you actually looked at it on the pressure charts, you can see it's actually building a very strong Scandinavian high with bitterly cold air 50 miles away. So we always have to take these charts with a pinch of salt. Some of them can be very mild and actually lead to very cold conditions. Some could be very cold but very transient with a polar maritime air mass. So again, we'll have to see, but definitely the most interesting thing here is the low precipitation signal, again indicating higher pressure, more in control. We can see that here, there are some very deep low pressure systems for London here, down below 1,000 millibars, but majority around 1,030 or higher. Again, just indicating the strength of that higher pressure potential within the outlook here. Definitely from around the 5th of February, very strong high pressure is building in, but it's where it goes there. You can see the operational run goes very high in terms of pressure. Not expecting something as strong as that, but definitely maybe 1,030, 1,040 millibars, maybe pushing northwards as well. Now, if we do look at the ECMWF ensembles for London, again, pretty similar over the course of the next week. A bit more of a milder air mass towards the 5th, 6th of February before it drops down towards average. Fewer colder runs here from the ECMWF, maybe one or two cold runs, but the majority around average for the time of year, with some milder ones as well. Again, quite a low precipitation signal from 50 ensemble members, indicating high pressure. It definitely is trending. And then again, if we look at the sea level pressure, again, some are significantly lowering it in longer term, but still many, and the average is still generally in favour of higher pressure to around the 10th, maybe just dipping towards favouring lower pressure beyond that. But the majority here favouring higher pressure and generally dry and probably still being in winter time, frosty, cold conditions, even when we do have generally milder upper air temperatures. If we do just have a look at Glasgow for further northwards as well, for the sea level pressure, this is where it will be very uncertain. We've got some very high pressure situations in the longer term, but some very low pressure situations as well, around 60, maybe 80 millibar spread here, right around that sort of 6th of February point to the 12th of February point. If we did those higher pressure situations, it would be cool, frosty, and with very high pressure further northwards, probably easterly flow would start to move in. But if we did see some of those much deeper low pressure situations, it would be more of a westerly flow and very unsettled. So you can see the two different scenarios, and they would have drastically different outcomes at the surface, even though on the pressure sort of pattern, it's just not high pressure reaching quite as far northwards. So we'll have to see. Definitely over the next few days, it will be deciphering where that high pressure goes. Does it push further northwards, or does it just stay over the top of us, or does it sink southwards? That will very much determine the first 2 weeks to February, and whether it could be dry, cold and frosty, could be very cold easterly winds, or whether it be relatively mild with a westerly stormy pattern prevailing. So anyway, thanks for watching, hope you enjoyed, subscribe if you're new, and I'll see you again for another video soon.